The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Well, as you know, fan of the X-Men, always have been, worn on my sleeve. I have every issue. That was funny though, because like 10 years ago, I'd say I have every issue. And it's kind of a bragging point. Like, people are like, holy shit, every issue. Wow, it's pretty impressive, every issue. And now I say I have every issue, and I get oh, I'm sorry. They're always like, the current ones? I'm like, yeah, to today. Like, oh, well, it's just funny how that's changed. I miss being able to brag about this. Damn it. The world has changed on me. It sucks. But it is funny. I think as a kind of meta commentary here, it is weird how if I go back in time 10 years ago, the idea of having a complete run, a collected run of comics was something to be proud of. And it was generally respected. And that changed a little bit where now having a complete run is kind of like, yeah, why would you do that to yourself? It's an interesting bubble that I think has burst. I was talking to a couple retailer friends, and our kind of our perspective or our idea was we may have some problems in the near future as retailers if the bubble is bursting a little bit with the value of collecting a run, because one of the things that comic shops have kind of counted on, it's inherent to the idea of pull boxes and other things, is that people like unbroken runs. It's very much connected and intrinsic to comics. And if that goes away, then that starts to be a big problem in a hurry. And I think it's one of the pillars of the comic book industry that for retailers is terrifying. If you start to actually dismantle this idea that, a run is an important thing. And what's funny is a lot of the comic publishers feel like they're trying to dismantle the idea of the comic run. And if I can get kind of, paranoid for a moment, the truth is out there, X-Files, then there's a world where, and I'm kind of going back in time a little bit, the publishers have had this interesting love-hate relationship with comic shops. Now, when I say this, several of you who may be in the business, I've had this argument with, one former executive from one of the big two a lot, who would say, no, we love the retailers. Well, you may. This person may. Various creators who are listening to this may. You may love, retail comic shops. But that is not necessarily a shared opinion in your company. Because there's also an opinion, and if the publisher is being honest about it, they've heard this as well. It can't just be me. I guarantee you this has been talked about, where there is this kind of concept of, hang on, we sell comics to the comic shop. Comic shop pays for those comics. If the comic gets hot and suddenly the retail shop can charge, $20, $50, $100 for that issue, well, that's all margin for the comic shop. By the way, I guess I should explain. I think everybody here probably knows this, but, in case you don't, the business model of comics, which does, underlie a kind of an inherent flaw, but the business model for comics is you, as a publisher, sell a comic for like $1.50 to the retail shop. The retail shop gets to charge $3 because that's the cover price. It's the difference between like wholesale and retail. The wholesale price, say $1.50, it's higher than that. But let's say it's $1. Keeping the math really simple. $1.50, and then you mark it up, basically double to $3. And so the comic shop takes home $1.50. If they sell it, that's $1.50 at risk, because if nobody buys this thing, then the comic shop paid $1.50 for something they can't sell. So it's when you see comics in the dollar bin or the quarter bin, if your comic shop has such a thing. By the way, there was a recent poll that went on in a Facebook group for retailers, and it was fascinating because it says, does your shop have a quarter bin or dollar bin for comics? Less than 20% did. Here's the interesting part. This group runs this poll every year. If I go back 5 years, that number was 75%. So 3/4 of the comic shops had a quarter bin or a dollar bin. Now 20%. That's a dramatic change. What does that mean? It means the comic shop's just ordering fewer books, bluntly. And, because they're not willing to take that risk. A lot of comic shops are moving to just pull box only. So this is kind of a dangerous thing. I haven't heard this talked about. Maybe other channels have done it, but this is a shift. It's actually a pretty sizable, important shift. But if a comic shop basically goes to the dollar bin, what that means is rather than make any money, they're actually losing 50 cents because they paid $1.50. They try to have it on the shelf for, 4 months or so. They can't sell it. And so they're selling it at a loss. So they at least recoup, $1 of the $1.50. So their loss is only 50 cents. That's basically what's going on. However, if the comic gets hot, so for example, Daredevil, there's the idea that like Elektra is going to be Daredevil. She's going to put on a Daredevil-like costume. And for a brief period of time, that comic shot up to like $25. A lot of comic shops are selling it. So what that means is the comic shop paid $1.50, $1.50, and they sold it for $25. So their margin is amazing. That is happy, glorious days for the comic shop. They just got all that margin. What that also means is that the publisher got nothing. Well, sorry, they got the $1.50, but they didn't get any of that upside. And a lot of people in the publisher are resentful of that fact. They believe, and this is the way they view it. I'm just telling you direct from the horse's mouth. Hang on, we made the comic, we sold the comic, and this is, I think, where the irritation comes in. We put in then a bunch of marketing to promote this big change in this comic. And we told all the retailers, hey, there's a big change in this comic. There's going to be a big shocking surprise. You should order higher. And the comic shops didn't order higher. They just ordered their same amount. So us as the publisher put all this money into marketing, all this money into promotion, all this money into hyping this big status quo change. We got no benefit from it as a publisher, but the retail shops that ordered this basically jacked up the price and made all this margin, and we got nothing. So basically, we put out the issue, then we extra spent in marketing and hype and got zero benefit from it. And opponents say, well, maybe the next issue got like a 10% bump, but it doesn't equal out to the money we put into it. So some of the publishers and some of the editors have said, that's why we're not marketing anymore. Because fuck it, we're not getting the money anyway, so why should we basically put out this expense when there's no upside in it for us? That's the thought process. Now, the way you look at it, it's a flawed way of thinking. It's a flawed way of thinking because if you market things, then what should happen is that the number of comics ordered grows over time. And so you need to think about marketing as a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. If you're the publisher, you have to think of it that way. Because the elephant in the room is that for a lot of publishers, they went to the hype machine so often that comic shops, retailers no longer believe that when the comic shop says, hey, you really need to order high on this one, that anyone will. We saw this recently with the Secret series that Marvel was trying to get retailers to order without letting them know what the series was. Turned out it was the resurrection of Miss Marvel as a mutant. And so it's a 5-issue series of Miss Marvel as a mutant. And, they basically told the retailers, we can't tell you what it is because it will spoil who's dying in Spider-Man. But, you're going to want to order big. Well, the problem is the comic shops are like, yeah, fooled me 800 times. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. If you make this issue returnable, game on. Then we'll order big because you're giving us the returnability, but the trust is gone. When you tell us, hey, this is going to be big, yeah, we've heard that before for 800 things. You told us that this relaunch of Iron Man was going to be big, and you told us the relaunch of Squirrel Girl was going to be big, and then you've gone to that well so often, you have no credibility. And so you got to bring something else to the table. And so they don't. But the way the retailer needs to look at this thing is for the long term. If you put a bunch of hype to a comic and more people start buying it, the retailer will start ordering more copies. And when they order more copies, then, it's the all boats will rise mentality where you will get more safe recurring revenue. But the publishers have largely moved into hotshot type stunts with relaunches and variant covers and other things. So their entire financial mentality is really wired to short term. So now we have a conflict. Marketing is naturally going to benefit long term. It's true of pretty much any business, but it's definitely true of comics. The person who's going to benefit from the marketing in the short term is the retailer. But if the retailer is making money and is healthy and is profitable, the retailer will order more comics. Nearly every business, when they make more profit, they sink the money back into their business. That's definitely true with comics. So as much as it may sting to see you put in a bunch of marketing and then the retailer take the lion's share of the margin, the returns, it's still better for you because that retailer who's making more money is going to buy more comics. And if they, get the good faith that a publisher brought them a bunch of cash, then the likelihood is they're going to, honor and respect that publisher. This is kind of sales 101. That's just how it works from a sales perspective. So, look, I think that's where we're at. And so when you think about kind of, this dismantling of runs, it's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous for the publishers to go on this path where the comic shop is no longer thinking long-term. Short-term thinking overall is bad. It's particularly negative and harmful for comics because comics, by their very nature, are designed to be recurring revenue streams. Now, for those of you who don't know this term, but it's pretty obvious, it means basically that you're not selling a one-time purchase. You're trying to get somebody into something where they're going to buy, month in, month out, constantly. And that's why a lot of people become retailers in the first place. They want to have that kind of recurring cushion of cash. If you give them reasons to, if you give the reader reasons to break that habit, then the retailer, very naturally, because they want to stay in business, will start to shift their thinking to short term. And if they shift their thinking to short term, they're suddenly at odds with the retailer. The retailer's at odds with the publisher. It becomes a conflict that's harmful overall to the business. It becomes a cycle downward. And that's really what we've been witnessing for the last 4 years. We've been witnessing kind of the break between long-term and short-term thinking. And, retail businesses really can't exist, for very long on short-term thinking. Eventually they gravitate to things that they can count on. Because, look, when it's September and you're trying to understand if you, can afford presents for your kids for Christmas, you need to have a way to forecast how much money you're going to make between September and December. And so you're naturally going to be in a headspace of long-term thinking. But if the publishers are doing everything in stunts and then being resentful for you when you get money for those stunts, all of that's negative. All of that leads to a broken channel. By the way, not none of this, but a lot of this wouldn't matter if, and it's a major if, comics were sold places other than the direct market. But they're not. That is the primary new comic. I understand trades are sold other places, but even there, it's a little sketchy. The comic industry is primarily supported by the retailers, by the direct market. And there really isn't other options. The newsstand doesn't exist. So you see the problem here. If you piss off your one outlet, your one distribution model, well, now you're screwed. So what needs to happen is a bunch of things. Comic publisher needs to focus on long-term thinking and not be worried about who makes money in the short term. They're in it for the long haul. You need to reinforce the idea of subscription, long runs, the value of people coming in month after month buying the same comic book because that's your safety net. That's your stability. You need to pass that stability on to the retailer so they also feel safe. And then, as a publisher, you need to work on distribution models that go outside the comic shop. Because just like the comic shop doesn't want to be beholden to one thing, neither should you as a publisher. You need other outlets. And if you bring all those things together, it's business 101, life will be better. Anyways, sorry for the shop talk, but, got it off my chest. Thanks for listening.